The biting wind whipped through the skeletal branches of the whispering woods, carrying the scent of pine and the faintest, almost metallic tang of decay. It was a fitting welcome to Erthos, a kingdom teetering on the precipice of ruin, a place where hope seemed to have long abandoned its post. For me, however, a god stripped of my divinity and cast into this mortal coil, it was a starting point. I was once known as Theron, weaver of worlds, architect of souls, but now I was just Elias, a wandering scholar with eyes that held the echoes of forgotten ages and a hunger that gnawed deeper than any earthly famine. The celestial energy that once coursed through my veins was now a mere trickle, barely enough to mend a deep wound, let alone reshape reality. I remembered the fall, the searing pain, the echoing laughter of the usurpers who had stolen my throne. They believed me dead, erased. Their arrogance was my advantage. Erthos, a kingdom nestled in the shadow of the Dragon's Peak, was rumored to hold a secret, a relic of ancient power that resonated faintly with the echoes of my lost divinity. It was my only lead, a thread of hope in a tapestry of despair. I donned the guise of a traveling scholar, spouting vague theories about the nature of the cosmos and offering my services as a tutor to the wealthy merchant class. One listened, I observed, and I waited. The kingdom was ruled by King Alaric, a man burdened by a growing darkness, both within and without. His advisors whispered of a wasting sickness, a plague that decimated the farmlands and left its victims twisted and grotesque. The royal physicians were baffled, their remedies proving useless against the encroaching blight. The temples of the old gods stood silent, their priests offering empty promises and desperate prayers to deities who seemed to have turned a deaf ear. Into this void of faith, the Order of the Crimson Dawn had crept, a zealous sect promising salvation through purification, a purification that often involved burning at the stake. Their leader, High Inquisitor Valerius, was a charismatic and ruthless man, his eyes burning with a fanaticism that chilled me to the bone. He saw heresy everywhere. She was intelligent, observant, and possessed a quiet courage that belied her humble station. We bonded over shared love of ancient texts, and she eventually confided in me her suspicions about the plague. She believed it was not a natural phenomenon, but something engineered. She had found fragments of coded documents, hinting at experiments conducted beneath the royal citadel decades ago. "They called it the Project Genesis," she whispered one evening, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire in the library's hearth. "He told my mother that they were trying to improve the human form to make them stronger, more resilient, but something went wrong. Terribly wrong." My dormant power stirred at the mention of Project Genesis. It resonated with echoes of forbidden knowledge, of tampering with the very fabric of life. I knew then that this was it, the secret I sought. The power I needed to reclaim my divinity was not a relic, but a perversion, a corrupted echo of the divine spark. Ilara, trusting me implicitly, helped me navigate the labyrinthine tunnels beneath the citadel. The tunnels were damp and claustrophobic, lined with crumbling stone walls and rusted metal pipes. We passed chambers filled with discarded equipment, broken vials, and the skeletal remains of creatures that defied description. They were human, or had been, but their forms were twisted and contorted, their bones elongated and misshapen. "What did they do here?" Ilara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "They played God," I said, my voice grim. "And they failed miserably." Finally, we reached the heart of the complex, a vast chamber dominated by a massive contraption of metal and glass, humming with a faint, unnatural energy. It was human, or at least had started as human, but its body was grotesquely mutated. Its limbs were elongated and spindly, its skin stretched taut over its bones. Its eyes were large and vacant, devoid of any intelligence or emotion. It was a failed experiment, a monstrous parody of life, but something about it resonated with me. It was a vessel, a conduit for power, a power that was strangely familiar. Suddenly, the chamber was bathed in the harsh light of torches. High Inquisitor Valerius stood at the entrance, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "Heresy!" Valerius roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You dare defile this sacred ground with your presence? You seek to unearth the secrets that were meant to be buried? Sacred?" I scoffed. This is a tomb, Valerius, a tomb of ambition and hubris. You will pay for your blasphemy, Valerius snarled, gesturing to his guards. Seize them! The guards charged, their swords glinting in the torchlight. Ilara and I fought back, but we were outnumbered and outmatched. I used my limited power to conjure bursts of energy, knocking back several guards, but I was growing weaker with each exertion. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, the creature in the tank stirred. Its eyes flickered open and a low guttural moan escaped its lips. The chamber began to tremble, and the humming of the machine grew louder, more intense. Valerius and his guards stopped in their tracks, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. "What is happening?" Valerius demanded, his voice trembling. The creature in the tank slammed against the glass, its mutated limbs flailing wildly. The tank cracked, and the viscous fluid began to spill onto the floor. The power within it resonated with my own, drawing me towards it like a moth to a flame. Mia. I understood then. The Project Genesis was not just about creating stronger humans. It was about harnessing divine power, about creating a vessel for the gods themselves. And this creature, this failed experiment, was a flawed but potent conduit. Valerius, realizing the danger, ordered his guards to attack the creature. But it was too late. The creature shattered the tank and stumbled out, its mutated form dripping with the green fluid. The chamber was silent, save for the humming of the machine and the rasping breath of the creature. It turned towards me, its eyes no longer vacant, but filled with a spark of recognition. It reached out a mutated hand towards me, and I took it. A surge of power flowed through me, filling me with a strength I had not felt in ages. The creature was a key, a bridge to the past. Through it, I could access the fragmented echoes of my lost divinity, but it was also corrupted, tainted by the experiments that had created it. It was a dangerous gamble, but I had no choice. I focused my remaining power, channeling it into the creature's mutated form. I delved into its consciousness, battling the twisted energies that plagued it, seeking the remnants of its original humanity. It was a grueling struggle, a battle fought on a metaphysical plane, but slowly, surely, I began to make progress. The creature's form began to shift, to revert to its original human shape. The mutated limbs shrank, the skin smoothed, and the vacant eyes regained their intelligence. The creature stood before me, no longer a monster, but a young man, his face pale and bewildered. He looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Who are you?" he asked, his voice weak and raspy. "I am Theron," I said, my voice resonating with newfound power. "And I am here to help you." Releasing the young man, whose name, I learned, was Gareth, was only the first step. I could feel the echoes of my divinity growing stronger, but they were still fractured and incomplete. I needed to gather the remaining fragments, to purge the taint of the Project Genesis from the land. The Crimson Dawn would be seeking revenge, and they would not hesitate to unleash the remaining horrors of the Project Genesis upon Erthos. Ilara, Gareth, and I escaped the citadel, fleeing into the Whispering Woods. We needed to find allies, to gather strength, to prepare for the coming storm. The fate of Erthos, and perhaps the fate of the world, rested on our shoulders. Over the next few weeks, we traveled through the kingdom, seeking out those who had been affected by the plague, those who had lost loved ones to the Crimson Dawn's purges. They were wary at first, but my growing power and my genuine desire to help them eventually won them over. Gareth, now free from the influence of the Project Genesis, proved to be a valuable ally. He remembered fragments of his past, of the experiments he had undergone, of the scientists who had sought to control him. He knew the weaknesses of the Project Genesis, the vulnerabilities of the remaining creatures that lurked beneath the citadels and strongholds of the Crimson Dawn. Ilara, with her knowledge of ancient texts and her unwavering courage, served as our strategist and diplomat. She also uncovered a hidden network of spies within the Crimson Dawn, providing us with vital intelligence about their plans. Together we built an army, a coalition of rebels and outcasts, united by their hatred of the Crimson Dawn and their hope for a better future. We trained them in the ancient ways of combat, in the use of herbs and potions, in the power of faith and unity. We prepared them for the final battle, the battle that would determine the fate of Erthos. The Crimson Dawn, led by Valerius's successor, Inquisitor Zealous, launched a counter-offensive. They hunted us relentlessly, burning villages and slaughtering anyone who dared to oppose them. The final battle took place at the ruins of an ancient temple, a place of power that resonated with the echoes of my lost divinity. Our army clashed with the Crimson Dawn's forces, a chaotic melee of steel and fire. Gareth, wielding a sword forged from the fragments of the Project Genesis machine, fought with a ferocity born of his past torment. Ilara, armed with a bow and a quiver of enchanted arrows, rained down death upon the enemy ranks. I summoned storms of lightning and fire, turning the tide of the battle in our favor, but the Crimson Dawn was relentless, and their creatures were formidable. We suffered heavy losses, but we held our ground. Zealous, a man consumed by hatred and ambition, confronted me personally. He wielded a weapon imbued with the corrupted energy of the Project Genesis, a weapon that could drain my power and shatter my soul. We engaged in a fierce duel, our blades clashing, our powers colliding. He was strong, but I was stronger. Finally, with a surge of power, I disarmed Zealous and struck him down. His body crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with disbelief. With his death, the Crimson Dawn's forces faltered, and our army surged forward, routing the remaining enemies. The battle was won, but the war was not over. The taint of the Project Genesis still lingered in the land, and the wounds of the past were still fresh. I knew that I had to stay, to help rebuild Erthos, to guide its people towards a brighter future. With the Crimson Dawn defeated, Erthos began to heal. They worked to eradicate the remaining vestiges of the Project Genesis, to cleanse the land of its taint. As for me, I remained in Erthos, guiding them from the shadows, slowly reclaiming my lost divinity. The power I had drawn from the Project Genesis was not pure, but it was enough to reignite the spark within me. I spent years researching, meditating, and delving into the ancient lore, seeking ways to purify the corrupted energy and restore it to its original form. The journey was long and arduous, but eventually, I succeeded. With each step, my divinity grew stronger, my connection to the cosmos more profound. Finally, the day came when I felt ready to leave Erthos. I had fulfilled my purpose, I had helped to rebuild the kingdom, and I had reclaimed my lost power. I bid farewell to Gareth and Ilara, promising to watch over them from afar. As I ascended towards the heavens, I looked back at Erthos, at the kingdom I had helped to save. It was a small, insignificant place in the grand scheme of things, but it was a place where I had found redemption, a place where I had rediscovered my purpose.